Hello, hello. Happy Tuesday. Happy pre-Thanksgiving Tuesday. Thank you guys so much for joining us, whether you're on Facebook or YouTube. We really appreciate you joining us for our fourth series of our Impact series hosted by the East Coast Greenway Alliance. My name is Angela Hollowell. I am a content specialist here with the organization, and I just want to say thank you so much for joining us. If you were with us last week as we spoke with Bruce about the Southern New England region, thank you for coming back. We really appreciate you joining us again. And if it's your first time here, welcome. The Impact Series is our time at the end of the year to just kind of share the developments that have been happening along the East Coast Greenway, to envision what the Greenway will look like in the new year in 2022, and to celebrate for you and the support that you've given us in advocating for trail development, trail design, and safer, more equitable access along the East Coast Greenway. Today, we'll be speaking with Sarah, who is the Virginia, North Carolina Regional Manager, about her region, but we won't just be hearing from her. We also want to hear from you. So please feel free to drop your comments, your questions, suggestions, experiences, feedback along the Greenway in the chat, and we'll be sure to feed those questions to Sarah at the end of her talk and get those questions answered for you. So without further ado, Sarah, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. Hi, everybody.
Hi. So the first question is, first of all, like you're joining us from Germany, so it is technically 5 o'clock in Germany. If you've been with us before, we've been hosting these in the evening, so host them a little bit early this week to make sure that Sarah could join us when she's not extremely tired and in the middle of the night. But you are originally from the Virginia, North Carolina area. Virginia is kind of your home state, and when you were here with East Coast Greenway, you were living in North Carolina. So can you tell me a little bit about some of your favorite trails along Virginia, or some of the developments, along Virginia and that area that just developed this year?
Sure. Yeah. So Virginia is indeed my home state. I'm in Berlin, Germany right now. Might be able to see that it's already dark outside here. It's 5 p.m. here. But yes, I am from Virginia, and I think one of the most exciting developments for the East Coast Greenway in Virginia this year was actually in my hometown of Fredericksburg, Virginia. They recently completed reconstructing the Chatham Bridge, which is a bridge that goes over the Rappahannock River, and it connects the city of Fredericksburg with Stafford County. And the bridge has been there for ages, but previously it was just for motor vehicles. And with the new reconstruction, they now have a bike ped multi-use trail as part of the bridge. So you can go right over the Rappahannock River, biking, walking, using a wheelchair or another mobility device. And it's just really a great spot and a great project. It also is big for the East Coast Greenway because now we have a safe and accessible connection between the city of Fredericksburg and Stafford County, and a safe way to get over quite a wide stretch of the river there. So I know that folks in Fredericksburg and the Regional Planning Commission there are also really happy about that. So that's one of our most exciting projects in that part of Virginia. Otherwise, in Virginia, moving south, many folks who are from the area probably know about the Fall Line Trail, but this is another project that we are really excited about. So for those who don't know, the Fall Line Trail is going to be a trail that covers the entire Metro Richmond area. So going all the way from Asheville on the northern end, south towards Petersburg on the southern end. So this is a north-south trail. It's going to be about 43 miles long, which is pretty incredible. A multi-use trail for all ages, all abilities. Some of it's already funded. Some of it's already going into the design and engineering phase. And most recently, the Central Virginia Transportation Authority, also known as CVTA, just announced that they are going to vote in a couple weeks about earmarking a little over $100 million towards the Fall Line Trail, which would be huge towards getting this trail constructed. And of course, having the Fall Line Trail developed, which will take a few years or several years, but having it developed will complete the East Coast Greenway through the Richmond metro area. So you can see on the map there, there was that green line that represented where the Fall Line Trail runs. So this will be really big for us because that's going to be 43 miles that will be done from Ashland to Petersburg, which is huge for connectivity and accessibility. So we're really lucky that we get to work with all the different stakeholders on the Fall Line Trail project, most of whom are based in the greater Richmond area, and are just can't wait to see the developments with the Fall Line Trail. So lots going on in Virginia. Plenty other projects that we don't have time to mention today, but definitely really exciting things in my home state.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. So I know you said you kind of cut it short a little bit as you're talking about the Fall Line Trail and all the great things coming to Virginia. And this next question probably isn't going to make all the great things happening be explained more concisely, but we're going to go for it. There are a lot of eyes on the infrastructure bill, a Build Back Better bill, and all the federal dollars that are now being geared towards infrastructure and what that means for the East Coast Greenway. So can you talk to me about what that means on the state level and local level here in North Carolina?
Sure, yeah. So a lot going on in North Carolina too, but all good things. So first of all, this is actually related to federal funding, but the city of Durham was just notified that they received $9 million in federal funding from USDOT's RAISE grant program for the Durham Beltline Trail, which will be a connection to the East Coast Greenway. So very excited about that. But on the state level for North Carolina, probably our biggest piece of news for North Carolina this year was the passing of House Bill 130. So this bill was what we were working on for more than a year now. Essentially, this bill gets the Greenway designated as a state trail in North Carolina. So not only is it an official state trail now, as you can see, Governor signed the bill there in that photo back in June. It's a state trail, and it's also a unit of the North Carolina State Park System. So this means we get to join about 11 other official state trails across North Carolina that have regional and statewide significance. And now we are a unit of the North Carolina State Park System, which we are so excited about. And essentially, this designation makes the East Coast Greenway eligible for a much wider array of funding sources for both planning and building the trail. And it also, of course, makes us part of state parks, increases visibility, etc. So that was our big piece of news that was officially signed back in June. And that is something that we've been working on for quite a while. And so I think a lot of the folks who are watching right now are probably folks who helped us with that. So thank you for everyone who talked to your legislators about that and advocated for our bill, and which finally passed. The other piece of big news right now for North Carolina is that the North Carolina budget just came out and was signed by the governor, and there is an incredible amount of funding and support for trails in the North Carolina state budget. We are so thankful to both the legislators and to Governor Cooper, who signed this budget into action. Essentially, the trails funding that is part of this bill is a new funding source for trails. It's called the Complete the Trails Fund, and it has just over $29 million for trail funding in the Complete the Trails Fund. It also sets aside funding for a new trail coordinator to work statewide, who will probably join the amazing Smith Rayner at North Carolina State Parks in helping to plan and build trails across the state. And especially relevant for the East Coast Greenway is that in the budget, there is also $2 million for feasibility studies for trail planning, which are especially important because before you can build a trail, you have to do a feasibility study in order to prepare for the engineering and the design. So we are so happy with the trails funding and the trails support in North Carolina state budget this year. I think if you look in the chat, you can find a link to more information about the specifics of the budget. But in order not to go on too long about that, I will just say The last point I'll touch on for North Carolina is that we got a lot of work done with wayfinding signage on the Greenway in North Carolina. So as we all know, North Carolina is a very big state. Not only is it very wide, it's also very long. So we have a wonderful volunteer who works with us. His name is Stephen Hardy-Braz. He's based out of the Farmville area of North Carolina near Greenville. And he installed hundreds of miles worth of East Coast Greenway wayfinding signage over the course of the last several months. So covering both our complimentary coastal route and our spine route, he was out there in the sun, in the rain, in the heat, and the humidity, just installing hundreds of wayfinding signs. So if you're out on the Greenway in North Carolina anytime recently, and you see signs that look particularly new and shiny, then they are probably thanks to Stephen. So we are very close to having North Carolina almost completely finished with wayfinding signage. We have a few key areas left to go, but I think within the next year, North Carolina will be fully signed so that any Greenway users will know where they're going and be able to find their way safely. So that was huge for North Carolina this year. So yeah, the bill, the state budget, the signage, a lot happening in North Carolina too.
Nice, nice. Yeah. Stephen Hardy-Braz, we really thank him for just being here and doing some of the wayfinding signage since Sarah's in Germany, so we can keep things up to date, keep people knowing the safest way to go and the best way to go. And hopefully we can keep that going. For those of you that don't know, we are unfortunately looking for someone else. But again, while Sarah was here, I think she had a great time on the Greenway. And I would love to hear what some of your favorite trails were here in North Carolina when you lived here.
Yeah, so when I was still living in Durham, I think my favorite way to get out on the East Coast Greenway actually was biking to work. So I lived in downtown Durham, and as many of you know, our office is in South Durham, our headquarters office, kind of near the South Point Mall. And so being able to bike to the office was just my favorite because I could leave my house, and from my house to our office was about 7 miles by bike. And that was just a great form of both exercise and stress relief. I got to be on the American Tobacco Trail every time I was going to work. In the fall, it's just gorgeous leaves all along the American Tobacco Trail. So that was absolutely one of my favorite parts. And then, of course, there are so many other sections of the East Coast Greenway that were close to my heart. I got to spend a lot of time before I moved over to Germany up in northern part of Virginia in Prince William County, checking out some new segments of the trail that they've recently built. That was a place that's special to me because it's kind of near where I'm from, but it's also quite an urban part of Virginia. Yet the trails, you just would think you're in the middle of the forest out in a rural area. So they're doing incredible work building trails up there, and I got to be part of that for some of the time before I left. And just so many of the other sections of the Greenway in both Virginia and in North Carolina, I enjoyed walking or biking, whatever it was. I certainly have no lack of good bike ped infrastructure here in Germany. They also prioritize that, but not quite the same as what I had back in the States. So yeah, hard to pick a favorite because I do love them all.
Nice, nice, yes. And we appreciate the nice comparison in Germany. I think if we can compete with Germany, we're in good company. So no problem there. No complaints from me. And of course, from people who are watching, tuning in with us, I see you guys, and I want you guys to be able to get your questions in too. So be sure to drop those in the chat for Sarah because this is the last question I have for her. So I need you guys to help me out. I know you may be like pre-food coma, but you're not there yet. So just hang in here with us, and thank you guys so much for joining and hanging out. So Sarah, while we have you for a little bit longer, can you tell me a little bit about what you're excited to see happen and develop along the Greenway in 2022 in North Carolina and Virginia?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think what we saw this year in 2021 was just so many projects that were set into momentum. And then what we're going to see in 2022, of course, is those projects being played out. So for example, in North Carolina, our state budget just came out. And as I mentioned, there's that new Complete the Trails Fund in the budget. There's new feasibility study for trail planning. So what I'm really excited to see next year is, in North Carolina in particular, is seeing some of these trails actually built that we've been wanting for years to happen. And so that Complete the Trails Fund, for example, that's going to be huge for construction. And then the feasibility studies, some of these corridors where we've wanted to look at building a piece of the East Coast Greenway, we haven't been able to, just because of not being able to get funding for certain feasibility studies. So seeing those finally planned and actually in action will be really exciting, because this is exactly what we needed, was the funding coming through to do it. So I think North Carolina is going to have a really, really big year for trails in 2022. And speaking of, also in North Carolina, 2023 will be the actual legislatively designated Year of the Trail. So another bill that passed this year was designating 2023 as Year of the Trail in North Carolina. So it's going to be a year of celebrations for all types of trails across the state. East Coast Greenway Alliance is absolutely going to be one of the leaders involved in that. So that'll be quite a fun year to celebrate all the work that I hope will get done in 2022. And then in Virginia, of course, as I mentioned, the Fall Line Trail is already rolling full steam ahead. So I'm really excited to see where this funding is going to go. Of course, there's feasibility studies that have to be done, engineering, design, and of course the final construction phase. But I think a lot of progress will happen on the Fall Line Trail in 2022. I think we'll probably see even more funding coming through for it. But more particular to the East Coast Greenway as a whole in Virginia, one area where we really need to see some progress is getting our wayfinding signage across the state in Virginia. So I mentioned North Carolina, our wayfinding signage is getting pretty close to complete across the state. Virginia, we do have a little bit more of a ways to go. So I think if we can see VDOT step up to partner with us on getting wayfinding signage in the state right-of-way areas, we can get a ton of work done in Virginia to get our wayfinding signage across the state completely done. That's something that I think will be a big focus of ours in 2022. And of course, we have more trail segments coming online every month in Virginia. A new one was just built in the Hampton Roads area, part of the Suffolk Seaboard Coastline Trail. And that's part of our complementary route. So I think areas like that, where we're all of a sudden seeing, oh, there's major progress here. It's really exciting, and I think we're going to see more of that in 2022 as both state and federal funding comes down the line. So I'll just wrap up on a note of saying that for both states, the federal infrastructure plan, the Build Back Better plan, it's going to be great for both states to see more of that federal funding coming down the line, because projects, like I said, that we've waited to do for years are finally going to get that funding and get planned or engineered or finally constructed. So I'm very hopeful, and I think 2022 is going to be a good year for the Greenway.
Okay. We have a few questions here that I do want to get into. So you talked about kind of the new segments in Virginia that are coming online, but we actually just had 3 new segments that popped up for us here in North Carolina, as well as the Durham Beltline Raise grant that we received. So can you talk to us a little bit more about those new segments that just came up in Durham, North Carolina? Obviously, I'm biased. I live in Durham. I love Durham, so I want to hear about the Beltline for sure, but also about the new trail segments that we got designated to the trail in October.
Yeah, so some new designations in October, I think 3 total in North Carolina. So it's been a big fall of 2021 there too. So one is in the town of Clayton in Johnston County. They built a little connector into downtown. So we got that designated, that connects Sam's Branch Greenway into downtown Clayton. So I know a lot of folks are excited about that. The bigger picture highlight there is that now the East Coast Greenway in the Triangle region of North Carolina is not only the longest connected metro area along the Greenway, but now it connects all the way from North Durham to downtown Clayton. So that's Durham, Cary, Raleigh, all the way to Clayton. So that's just a final piece there that makes that connection even longer. So there's that one. We designated some trail segments in Jacksonville, North Carolina, along our complementary coastal route. And those segments actually highlight the Lejeune Memorial Gardens in Jacksonville. So that's a great cultural connection as well. And then in terms of other trail projects in North Carolina, we mentioned there's of course the Durham Beltline, which is part of downtown Durham, and so that federal funding just came through for the Durham Beltline or the Durham Rail Trail. That one is going to be a connection to the East Coast Greenway. So the East Coast Greenway, of course, runs up into downtown Durham via the American Tobacco Trail, and the Beltline will connect through downtown. So that will be one way that East Coast Greenway travelers can get through downtown Durham. So let's see, so much North Carolina to keep track of. I think that's it for our recent North Carolina ones, but if I'm missing one, feel free to remind me.
Yeah, I'm sure somebody watching here probably knows, but we have a question here. Again, going back to North Carolina from Dave Connolly on YouTube. He says, in North Carolina, the legislature in 2013 prohibited state funding for bike ped projects. Is that being repealed?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So NCDOT, for those who don't know, North Carolina Department of Transportation. So that's where a lot of our funding for bike ped projects goes through. So for a while now, since 2013, of course, as Dave mentioned, the funding that is going to bike ped is just for planning, no longer for construction. And so one effort that a lot of bike ped advocates have worked on recently is trying to get that law repealed so that NCDOT funding can go towards construction of bike ped infrastructure. That was not successful in being repealed this time around, although that was a project that many folks were working on. So right now it remains that the funding going through NCDOT is just planning and not construction. So that's something that hopefully in the future will change so that the state can fund construction projects. Of course, there is federal funding for bike ped projects, but we all know that the more funding, the better. And so when states have to rely just on federal funding, it's a lot harder to get construction done. So that's something that we hope for in the future, that the DOT will again be able to allocate funding towards bike ped construction, which of course is helpful for segments of the East Coast Greenway.
Awesome. Thank you for that question, Dave. The next question is from Brandon Brown, also on YouTube. They say, greetings from Stafford County, Virginia, Sarah. Good to see you are doing well in Deutschland. I think that's how it's pronounced. And he says, we're working on it with a smiley face.
Thanks, Brandon. Yep, I'm originally from Stafford County, went to Stafford High School, so it's good to see some of my local folks in here. Thank you all for joining.
We have an acknowledgement of another trail that we got a grant for called the Great Dismal Swamp Trail in Virginia. Can you tell us a little bit about that trail and what you're excited for along that route?
Yeah, so this is something breaking news that we just got recently. So many folks might know about the Great Dismal Swamp Canal Trail, both on the North Carolina side and on the Virginia side. So there is existing trail on the Virginia side going along the Great Dismal Swamp, as well as on the North Carolina side. But there is a gap in between these two segments right around the state line where Virginia and North Carolina meet. And so one thing we've been working on, as well as a lot of the stakeholders with the city of Chesapeake and that part of North Carolina as well, is trying to figure out how can we get a connection built to connect these two existing pieces of trail so that folks don't have to get on a dangerous highway in order to bike or walk to get to the other segment. So we were recently awarded grant funding from the Virginia Outdoors Foundation to essentially conduct an informal feasibility study to look at how we might be able to move towards getting a new trail segment built that connects these two existing segments. So we're very thankful to the Virginia Outdoors Foundation for that grant funding, and we are planning on working with the city of Chesapeake in terms of the planning department, public works, and the Parks and Rec department there, as well as several other stakeholders and volunteers that are in that part of Virginia around the city of Chesapeake and around the Great Dismal Swamp, on looking at how we can move forward with getting that trail built, which would of course eventually become part of the East Coast Greenway, but even more importantly, it would provide a safe and accessible way for folks there to get around by bike or walking or using a wheelchair, rather than having to get on Highway 17 there, which is quite dangerous for anyone who's not in a motor vehicle. So we will probably start that project at the beginning of 2022, working with the local stakeholders there. It'll probably last a little under a year to get that done, but that's going to be our new project in Virginia along our complementary coastal route that we are very excited about.
Awesome. Thank you so much for clarifying. I think it's very interesting that we're seeing expansion in kind of our capital cities around Raleigh and around Richmond, Virginia, with some trail development, but also closing some critical gaps and other needed infrastructure around our complementary routes and our spine route here in the East Coast Greenway in this region. So thank you for sharing a little bit more about that. I think that was so informative for our guest. It looks like we have one more question, and then I think we can tackle it. Um, so I just want to kind of share briefly, like, you've been with East Coast Greenway, and will be with us through the end of the year. If you could share just a little bit about what you kind of did as field staff while you were living here physically, and what people can expect when they reach out to us about suggestions, feedback, signage along the route, and just wanting to get involved, maybe in a similar capacity as Stephen Hardy Bras in terms of signage, and just getting out on the Greenway and encouraging other people to get out on the Greenway.
Yeah, that's a great question. So when we say field staff at the East Coast Greenway Alliance, we mean the staff like me, who are the regional coordinators or the regional managers from Maine to Florida. So each of us typically covers 2, sometimes 3 states. And our job is to wear a lot of different hats. So we do field work, we do advocacy and policy work, technical work, mapping, pretty much everything you can think of. So one of the big parts of what we do is the actual field work, so the site inspection. So as a trail is being built or after it's constructed, we go out there to make sure it fits the standards for design and accessibility for the East Coast Greenway. So for example, is it wide enough? Does it have an appropriate slope so that someone in a mobility device might be able to use this trail? What type of surface is it? Is it asphalt, concrete, etc.? So that's one of the more technical parts of our job, is those site inspections. But it's also one of the more fun parts, because that's when we get to go out and walk and explore new parts of the trail. A lot of what we do as field staff also has to do with mapping, making maps both for other colleagues that we work with and also for the general public. So we get to use GIS software and make all different types of maps of our route and different parts of our route. And then, of course, as I mentioned, there is the policy and the advocacy part of our job. A lot of what we do at the East Coast Greenway Alliance as an organization as a whole is advocating for safe and accessible bike ped infrastructure. So sometimes that's at the local government level, sometimes it's at the state level. So for example, House Bill 130, which I mentioned, that was what I spent much of my last year working on, was advocating for that bill at the state level in North Carolina. And then, of course, federal advocacy as well. So making sure there's appropriate bike ped funding in the transportation policies that go through Congress, etc. So we're not official registered lobbyists, but we do a lot of more informal lobbying and advocacy. And sometimes that advocacy has nothing to do with government. Sometimes it's just going and talking to community members about what benefits the East Coast Greenway might bring to their community. And then I think one of the biggest pieces that we do is that more direct community engagement. So for example, so many of the communities that our route passes through don't have any segments of trail yet. So our route might go through there, but there's no existing trail yet. So a big part of it is meeting with community members, understanding their wants and their needs, and what they might like to see in Greenway. The Greenway looks completely different, but depending upon the town or the region, because different towns and regions have different needs, different trail users. So a big part of it is just talking to people and listening and hearing what they might want for the Greenway in their region. So, and that's part of the reason I love this job, is because it is a lot of different hats. It's technical, it's people skills, it's being outside, it's being on a computer, sometimes using software, and just like any other job, of course, plenty of emails as well. But yeah, so the field staff have a bunch of different jobs all wrapped into one, which is most of the reason that I've loved this job so much while I've been here. So yeah, hopefully that answers that question.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you gave people a really wide range of view, or a 30,000 feet view of what you do here at the East Coast Greenway. I'm sure there's a lot more nuances to it, but yeah, thank you so much for joining me, Sarah. Thank you guys so much for viewing and watching and engaging with Sarah on developments along the East Coast Greenway in North Carolina and Virginia. You guys are so important to the work that we do here in growing the Greenway from Maine to Florida, and we appreciate all your donations, both financial, your time, and coming out and participating on the Greenway. So thank you so much for joining. And of course, as you can see, if you're shopping this weekend, hey, we think our logo is really cool. We thought it was cool enough to put on merchandise, and we would love for you guys to get some swag of your own. Rep the Greenway on the Greenway. That's the only way to do it, really. So we'll be dropping links for that in the chat. Donate if you want to get a little bit more of your donation, buy some merch. And once again, of course, if you want to take your ride a little bit further outside of the North Carolina, Virginia area, we do have the New York City to Philly ride registration open currently, and we would love to see you out there for that 2-day ride, a fellowship and just community with other cyclists and people who love the Greenway and want to see it continue to grow from Maine to Florida and be protected and safe and accessible for everyone. So thank you guys again for hanging out with us today. I want to see you guys rocking some East Coast Greenway merch the next time I see you on the Greenway. And Sarah, thank you so, so much. It was so awesome to speak with you today about your time here at North Carolina, Virginia.
Thank you. Thanks for coming out, everybody.